there's something called state-dependent memory. The state we're in determines what we remember. If we're in a depressed state, if we're in a bad mood from food, or from who we're around, or our addictions, that determines what flips up in memory. That's why it's so important to watch what you're doing with the obstructions, people, habit, or food, because that will bring up memory, and that determines our reactions, our behavior, who we have a grudge against, what we do. It's amazing what people will do if they're on a drunken spree, a toot of some sort, and they get angry about something that happened before, and they go out and take revenge. If they didn't have that mood, they wouldn't have remembered that. State-dependent memory. Very important concept. Now, before feminism came around, men knew women were weaker, and they respected and protected them as the weaker vessel. That's a good thing. But then since feminism, there's just competition between the sexes, and men don't always protect women. They may get in a boxing match, because that's how things have degenerated. When men no longer respect women as the weaker vessel, rather than saying, I can do what a man can do, I'm just as strong as they are, which is all bull, you know it is. When it comes to losing weight, it's interesting. The book is called Fat is a Feminist Issue. It used to be women were very trim and thin, with like 18-inch waist in the 50s, very small and petite. And men were big. They were alpha males. Well, lately women have gotten very fat. And the reason, according to the book, is they fear losing power. They fear that if they lose the weight, they'll be powerless. But power doesn't come from weight. Power comes from spirituality. Power comes from the brain. But in this dimension, that is not how they think. They think, I gotta get big to compete with the men. It used to be that in the 50s, it was the Lilliputian queens, the tiny queens. They had more power because Einstein proved that most creative energy comes in least mass. There's a book written by Helen Copley called The Silver Dawns about early California, where the women were Lilliputian, tiny. They were all tiny, and the men were giantism, giants, and yet the women ruled. Lilliputian queens, the tiny queens. Power does not come in brawn, only in a very prehistoric, primitive society. But if women don't watch themselves, if they compete with men, it does become violent. They trigger things in a man. Gotta watch what you say because he is so much bigger. I'd be careful around a man. But there's a lot of violence against women. Does it not come with feminism? Think about it. The biggest flip-flops in state-dependent memory comes from alcohol. Alcohol brings up old grudges. And depending on how allergic you are, i.e. alcoholic, those grudges come up. Memory and violence. And people thinking they have a right to be violent because that is what's coming up in state-dependent memory. Flip-flop, flip-flop. I was married to an alcoholic. And the first 3 years, he was like a king. He was so exalted, very godly looking and acting. And then when he resumed his drinking career, i.e. went back to drinking, I didn't know that he was an alcoholic before I met him. He became a totally different person. It was so frightening. And how he treated me like a queen, and then he treated me like dirt. A totally different person. state-dependent memory, alcoholics. I don't think there's anything more frightening than to have somebody you love and married to become the devil. All of a sudden you're living with the devil. But that's what it was like. In the 50s, ladies, tiny queens, were very respectful of men being bigger. And they honored them. Boy, things have sure changed. Since feminism, women are in competition with men. And how stupid, because you're going to lose. But you see, through the years, the dishonoring of men has gotten so much worse. And now boys have feminist mothers, feminist grandmothers, and the degradation of men has gotten worse through the decades, and now they're beta males. The alpha male is rare. They're coming back. Men are going their own way. They're not staying in dishonorable relationships. They're going to the gym and loving solitude and getting their alpha male back. That's good. But you see, feminism has just brought competition between the sexes, no longer fitting together perfectly. The woman respecting the man because he's bigger and he protects the family, he directs the show, and the woman and the man respecting and protecting the tiny queen because she orders the household and everything fits together. There's a division of labor and things worked. They no longer work. Marriages aren't staying together. They're just fighting. You can't tinker with the sex roles and not have a terrible violent revolution. And that's what's happened. Men in the 50s were tall, dark, and handsome. That's how I remember them. They were tall, dark, and handsome, alpha males. It's strange how the human race has changed. The women were pretty, the men were handsome. Nowadays, the woman henpecks the husband. Well, why don't you do this? And why aren't you respecting me for this? And here she has dirty dishes piled up in the sink. I demand respect. She doesn't command respect, she demands it. And just henpecking. I knew of a woman who was always putting her husband down. Like, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Always just calling him a loser and all this. That's the way it is. Just henpecking. That never happened in the 50s. Women respected men. And they were handsome. Men suffer from lack of praise. We don't think they do, like they're above it, they don't cry and all this, but they do suffer. And that's why men are going their own way. They'd rather have silence than all the judgment from being toxic male. And if a man wants cleanliness and decency and order, he's called unsupportive. He's called controlling, because he wants what anybody would want, order in the home. She's got to do her part too to keep order in the home, but that's called controlling. And anything he does. An alpha male should be honest. If a woman says, "Do I look fat in my jeans?" Well, if he's honest, she's going to be really mad. Unsupportive, he's unsupportive. If he's not honest, she's going to hate him for not being true to himself. She'll be able to tell. Either way, it's because men are walking around on eggshells. Don't want to, peace at any price. Don't want to cause her to be angry, because women, with feminism, it sort of gave them the right to be angry all the time. And it's released a torrent from women. Some women are rageaholics. That sort of thing didn't happen before. There was a clear boundary, because the alpha male establishes boundaries. That's part of it. He states yes or no, yay or nay, and boundaries. The beta male doesn't. It's diffuse boundaries. It's maybe this, maybe that, don't offend her, peace at any price. And that makes the woman mad because every woman wants an alpha male. So the woman tests him. Where's his boundaries? You know, what can I say to just pushes him. And that's why things get out of whack. There's no longer that mutual respect between male and female, the way we're supposed to be. I knew of a woman who was always abusing her husband terribly and just calling him a loser and pushing him his boundaries. And she was confronted by her mother, hey, you're abusing him. And she said, no, he's abusing me. That's how feminists see it. He's abusing me by being controlling because he wants order. He wants her to stay home. You know, he wants certain things that feminists see as controlling. She's bought that lie, and so there's this constant thing. He's abusing me when she's abusing him. Yeah, men are going their own way. They'd rather be in silence than face the judgment of women calling them toxic. They can't do anything right anymore. Everything is mixed up. So they are going to the gym, working on themselves, learning how to be alone, learning how to not need a woman, growing up. And then they attract the right woman who will respect them. Relationships are based on respect. Feminism has brought total disrespect of the male. He is an idiot in the sitcoms. He's somebody who's a puny figure and sort of dumb. And that's part of the people are laughing at him, and the woman takes a superior role. That's our culture now. Is it any wonder men are going their own way? The men going their own way are not avoiding love. They're avoiding the pain disguised as love. Where they can't say anything, they're afraid to say anything. That's not an alpha male. I don't know if things can return, but there is a revolution happening. As there was with feminism, now there's a huge backlash where men are becoming real men. This would not have happened before. And it's the boundaries that a man has to establish that is the alpha male. And that's what he's doing now. I'm not going to take this crap. I'm not going to be called toxic just because I'm a male. Everything has reversed. Men can't win a game that's rigged against them by television, by cultural norms now. The woman runs to her girlfriends and they all confirm he's a controller. You got to divorce him. They've all been divorced. You know, 70% to 90% of divorces are initiated by women, and it's because they've talked to their girlfriends who have been divorced. Yeah, it's rigged against them. So is it any wonder men are walking away? What else can they do? And the women end up alone or homeless, and they think, gee, my girlfriend said that the judge would give me a couple grand a month from his salary, and they go to court and the judge gives them $250 a month from it. Things are reversing. It's no longer female-centric in the courts. It's a risky thing to get a divorce. You're going to lose provision, and you're going to lose protection. That's what I want, protection from a man. Marriage is like a wall you come behind. No more men pestering you. No more problems socially. It's a wonderful thing, marriage. Other thing that's happening is men are no longer explaining why they walked away. They don't have to explain. It always becomes a fighting match. It should be obvious why they walked away. But not in a feminist culture, because everything he does is misjudged. The men aren't disappearing to make a point. They're disappearing to survive. That's the way it's been. I've gotten in fights with women, my God. Illogical. Liberal. Women are liberals. Men are more conservative. Right there is a terrible clash. I read an article that so many divorces happened because the husband was for Trump and the woman wasn't. Most women don't like Trump. They see an alpha male, they don't like that. And wow, think of that. Political arguments with a leftist in the marriage. It's obvious why he walked away, just to survive. When stripped of noise, obligation, pretending, expectations, the man finally sees who he is. He doesn't have to deal with her anymore. And he grows up. It can be frightening to her. What happened? You were a beta male and now you're drawing boundaries. Because he's free of the noise of arguing with a feminist. I don't want to argue with any feminist. My sisters were feminists. They went to liberal universities, and there's no winning in an argument with a feminist. They finally see. Peace does not come from somebody loving you. Peace comes from liking yourself. And how can a man like himself if he's seen as toxic? And all her girlfriends chime in. And she's always gossiping about her husband to her girlfriends to get support. She's trying to get cultural support, which is sick, against her own husband. There's the division. And she thinks, well, there's millions who agree with me, and it's just him. So obviously I'm right and he's wrong. No, she's wrong. The culture's sick. I love Ramadan fasting. I'll call it daylight hour fasting, day fasting. There's a clear delineation between night and day. You eat during the night. I eat in the early mornings before dawn, and then nothing during daylight hours. It has to do with circadian rhythms. Some people do better eating during the day, I guess, and not at night. But I like intermittent fasting where it's clearly delineated. Not one morsel during daylight hours. To me, it's just a neat thing. Life is 2 speeds. It puts you in Fastarian consciousness during the sunlight. And I've adapted to it all my life. I discovered it when I was 16, and my whole life changed by doing that way. 1 meal a day before dawn, and then just flying off to a spiritual day where I know it's not going to go down in the energy going down into digestion. The energy stays high. And knowing that brings on the spiritual Fastarian consciousness. Daytime fasting, daylight fasting. I don't eat dinner. It's just 1 meal before dawn. I recommend it for those who wish to get into the spiritual through self-denial and discipline, self-discipline, where the mind is not going to go to food all day. Most people are thinking about food all day long, especially if they're into fast food. They're thinking about it, they're having lunch, and they're thinking about where they're going to go to dinner. 85% of our available energy goes to digestion, assimilation, elimination. 85%. All that goes up into the head during daylight fasting. I love it. I'll always be that way.